I see the world collapsing. It's happening, Lynette. I mean, you and I, you've been talking about it for years. We've all been knowing that everybody, I believe everybody viewing here has known that this was going to happen, right? It's not rocket science. This system is completely unsustainable. If you're watching this channel and you've been watching Lynette, you're way above what's going on with the rest of the world, and definitely take this message to heart.
I'm Lynette Zang, Chief Market Analyst here at ITM Trading, a full-service physical gold and silver dealer specializing in custom strategies. And I've said many, many times, and I'll probably say it many, many more times, food becomes the single biggest issue during currency regime shifts. And we can certainly see on a global basis how important that is. So today we have coffee with Lynette with a wonderful returning guest, so important, Marjory Wildcraft, who is the founder of the Grow Network, which is a community of people that are focused on modern, self-sufficient living, extremely important these days. She's been featured by National Geographic as an expert on off-grid living. She hosted the Mother Earth News Online Homesteading Summit, and she is listed in the Who's Who in America for having inspired hundreds of thousands of backyard gardens. Marjory was the focus of an article that won Reuters Food Sustainability Media Award, and she recently authored The Grow System, the essential guide to modern self-sufficient living, from growing food to making medicine, critical these days. But she's best known for her DVD series, Grow Your Own Groceries, which has over 500,000 copies in use by homesteaders, foodies, preppers, universities, and missionary organizations around the world. So this is a very, very important discussion, Marjory, especially with food insecurity at extreme levels. And frankly, it looks like it's getting worse. So thank you so much for coming back today.
I'm glad to be on, Lynette, and super appreciate the podcast that we've done before, both you on my channel and mine on yours.
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, precious metals are a super important part of surviving this next period, but food is also absolutely critical.
Oh, beyond that. But yeah. I wanted to ask you, how did you get into growing your own food? Because weren't you an engineer, among other things?
Yeah. My first degree is in electrical engineering, and I always wanted to live overseas. So I was an expat in Hong Kong working for Motorola. And when I was there, I was so inspired. I said, I really want to learn how to have money make money. Wouldn't that be cool? And I moved to Austin, Texas, and created a whole real estate investment business with, taking on investors and managing money and structuring deals and limited partnerships and the whole thing. How that all ended and abruptly, and my life just completely changed, was I was making tons of money. And because I did get very good at having money make money, I was volunteering. It's so innocent. I was volunteering on a farm to table project to get locally grown food, locally grown vegetables into the local elementary school. And we all thought that's going to be a slam dunk, it's such a good idea, right? And we're at the Red Rock Community Center, sitting on those crappy metal folding chairs, the chip formica table and the flickering fluorescent. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I do.
Community center, right?
Yep.
And we were so excited because Steve had contacted, he's already writing grants. There's tons of grant money for this kind of things. And Patty had talked to the principal and she talked to the PTA. They were all excited. And Mike, who's this guy's a researcher, he's one of these beards he's always messing with in those, wire rim glasses. And it, for kids that eat higher quality food, they score massively higher on intelligence test, and they have way less behavioral problems. The same is true for adults, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And you gave me chills, Marjory. You gave me chills. Go ahead.
But this was going to happen. We were all we're excited, So then this is when the whole thing really fell apart. So we got a piece of paper and a pencil, and we started to write down the names of the farmers who would provide the vegetables. there were not enough local organic farmers to provide even part of the vegetables for one small rural elementary school in all of Bastrop County. Like,
Wow.
we're right next to Austin, Texas, a really
Wow.
progressive area, and there is not enough locally grown food. And my body started, I involuntarily just started shaking, and it would go on for hours, because I knew that there's only 4 days worth of food supply in the grocery stores,
Yep.
and that the food gets trucked in an average of 1,500 miles on a just-in-time trucking system.
Yep.
And I had just found out there is no food in the countryside. Like, there's no plan B. And I'm 20 million Texans, Central Texas, they all want to eat that 60 million meals a day. And if anything happened, so really, literally, I couldn't stop shaking. I ended up selling. Like, there's no sense in making money when that's just no, that's not what my life purpose was meant for anymore. So I sold the business, and I just started focusing on what's the best way to learn how to grow food. And I will tell you, my health deteriorated, my relationships deteriorated, because, I'm just so focused on this thing. And my kids and I, like, weren't being invited to birthday parties and family events and stuff. And one of my sister-in-laws really kind of personified the whole thing. She's like, Marjory, the United States of America is the strongest country in the world. Like, they may have supply chain issues in other places. It ain't ever gonna happen here. And we are never gonna see empty shelves on our grocery stores, ever.
How long
And
ago was that?
yeah, that was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just said, I don't care. This is what I've been called to do. They say, if you see the problem, that's your problem to fix. And I thought, oh, good Lord, you have
Yeah.
really given me a big one here. But I just went on this whole tyrant to figure out, how do you take somebody who knows absolutely nothing? Maybe they're older, out of shape. Maybe it's a grid down situation. And how can you teach that? How can you get, what materials can you get them so that they'll be able to produce food very quickly, and lots of really good, deep quality, nutritious calories?
Yes.
How do you do that? And I'm really grateful that we've had this many years in the interim to really, first I needed to learn, and then I needed to learn how to
Exactly.
teach it properly, right? The first, that first video I did, that even though it had 500,000 views, which I think is pretty old, that's probably more like 1 million now. We've learned how to make the information even better, and to really chunk it down into small bits so that anybody can learn this and do it. But that's yeah, so that's what the Grow Network's all about. We founded that, and that's why I do this.
Well, it's critically important. I can't tell you how many times you gave me chills when you were talking, because I can recognize myself in that. Although my calling is to focus on the money part, but because of that focus, that's really why I started this farm, because I saw the same issue. And that's also why in our community, there are homeless schools that I support, and we put in gardens there, etc. But one thing that you stated, that I know that this is true, but I'd like to talk about it more with you, is the fact that when you eat poor quality food, you can't think as clearly as when you eat high quality food. And I believe that that is part of the overall plan, because if you can't think clearly, I mean, can you address that more deeply?
Well, yeah, the diseases that we see that are rampant now, the CDC has said that they estimate that all the kids born after 2000, 1/3 of them will have, severe diabetes. That's ridiculous.
That's
Know what I mean?
preventable.
That is totally preventable. Heart disease, cancer, those are the highest death rate. Those are all preventable lifestyle diseases. They all really, in America, we're all pretty big, but we're deeply, deeply malnourished. We're more malnourished than, places in Africa, right? It's a lack of fundamental minerals, and it's because of the food supply. We've been, the conventional agricultural systems do not regenerate the soils. They just have taken and taken and taken and depleted them to where they're producing stuff that kind of looks like food, and some of it even might taste good, but it has nothing in it. And that's one of the reasons people are so overweight, is that your body says, hey, I really do need some minerals here. Could you eat some more? And it's just a never ending thing. Yeah. But when you start eating your own homegrown food, oh my goodness, you'll recognize it right away. Like, that has got nutrients in it. And you do think
and
much
flavor.
more. You're sharper, you're clearer, you're healthier. I mean, honestly, I consider that day or that night when at the Red Rock Community Center the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, because now that I can grow food, I can wildcraft food, I can make my own medicine. I do not need a military industrial think tank complex to provide for me. I can just work right directly with the earth. There's such a sense of security and well-being. I see the world collapsing. It's happening, Lynette. I mean, you and I, you've been talking about it for years. We've all been knowing that I believe everybody viewing here has known that this was going to happen, right? It's not rocket science. This system is completely unsustainable. But you don't need the system, right?
You
can live a great life without it.
You can actually live a healthier life without it, but so many people are really dependent on it. And so we have to talk about the issues that are happening, like with the farmers. I mean, I started eating organic when you go to the store and it looked like an apple with blemishes on it, and it looked like an apple like you went out and picked it off the tree. Now everything looks perfect when you go into the store.
When the USDA when the USDA usurped the organic brand is when the whole thing deteriorated. So, organics might be a good step in that you're going to have less anti-nutrients and less toxins on it. But honestly, there's a lot of studies that have shown that organically grown conventional food does not have any more nutritional value than conventionally grown conventional food. You really have to be growing it yourself if you want that deep nutrition, and you do, or
yes,
really
you do.
Fundamentally, disease, there's a lot of parts of it, but one foundation of disease is malnutrition.
Yes, exactly. Because basically what you're doing is you're creating an environment that the disease really likes. And so that's what makes it grow versus eating the food that can create a more alkaline system that robs the disease of what it needs to grow. But can you talk about the move that we've seen, unfortunately, over the years for the small independent farmer and how they've been taken over by, frankly, big pharma? Because that's, who owns the seeds, and we have to talk about the seeds. So what's happening in that area, and what have you seen in that trend over all these years that you've been doing it?
Yeah, bless Willie Nelson, man. He used to have all those concerts to save the family farmer, and it just doesn't work. And even now, even though there is some resurgence of small family farms coming back, it's just basic economics. A small farmer is trying to compete with big agriculture who's using cheap, using fossil fuels, using chemicals, using mechanized, economies of scale. And, they produce a bag of apples that's, $2 for 10 apples. And a local organic farmer who's actually really working, doing good for the soil, that bag of apples, for him to really justify his time or her time, it needs to be sold for about, $10 or $15 a bag, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've all been willing to pay more of a premium for it, but not, but there's not, no people haven't really valued that. They haven't really understood it.
Personally, I do.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, to me, I don't care what the food costs. If it's good quality food, I'm going to buy it. I would rather pay for high quality food than pay for surgery and drugs and whatever is going to come from not having it, right? But we're a little bit extraordinary. So really, the smaller farmers have been trying to compete with this big system, and there has not been The consumer base now is starting to support them more, but it's a lot of work to really grow high quality food on, on a small farm. And we have not been willing to pay for that. So people have gone out. And even on the
Well,
big farms, it's so risky and the margins are so low. A lot of them don't want to even farm either. So,
Well, the government seems to subsidize the lower quality and not
yes.
the higher quality as well, which is, I think, another reason why those bags of apples are $2 versus $15. You know, but I mean, one of the ways that I think that we as individuals can vote is by buying that $15 bag of produce, you know.
Absolutely. And, or growing our own,
We're growing.
you know,
Well,
planting an
that's
apple tree.
ideal. I mean, that's what happened. Well, for me, it was kind of like a double-edged sword. Number one, I knew what was happening with the economy, and particularly when 2008 hit, I knew that the system died. And so that's when I went from a little two-bedroom condo, which would find me every time I would put a pot with vegetables out, right,
Oh
$50. It
no.
was so annoying. And then I bought this half-acre property, which has subsequently become an entire farm in the middle of the city,
Yeah.
as an urban farm. But it was because of my studies and also because I saw what was happening to the food, and I thought this is not the kind of quality of food that I want to eat. So I started growing, and honestly, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. But I am so grateful that I've had that time to really get, into position. Do you think that we're going to have any better chances with the food supply chain? I mean, what do you see on these barren grocery store shelves? Is that going to
Well,
get better, go away? What do you think?
no, it's going to get worse. Food is going to increase in price and it's going to become much less available. It's going to become very, very expensive just to fundamentally eat. And one of the other consequences of when it gets fundamentally expensive to eat is violence increases. Like a lot of people who would normally be very decent people, when you can't feed your children, you will go out and do things that you never thought you would go do in order to be able to feed your children. So we're looking at a really, really extraordinarily difficult time. Well, in 2015, there was a scenario done, and it was sponsored by Cargill, which is the largest privately held company on earth. And they have their fingers in every aspect of food production and processing and distribution. And I believe it was another one of these things organized by John Podesta. And it was called the Food Chain Reaction um, Crisis. And the script for that was, and it was publicly, back when they do these scenarios, they're
They're
actually
open.
really public, they're public with it, which I think is pretty awesome. Although back at that time I knew it was going on, I wasn't as clued in to like, oh my God, I need to pay attention to this. Anyway, the scenario was that something big would happen in 2020 and food prices would go up in that first year in 2020 by 20 to 40%. And then every year thereafter, they would go up by at least 100% all the way out to the end of the decade. And there would be, they did not factor in what we're going to see, what we're seeing right now, which is inflation and hyperinflation and currency collapse. This was assuming that the currency was at the same baseline.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that last year, the UN FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, has a food price index, and that basically went up by about 40% in 2020, and it's now doubling. By the way, they took all of that down. The Food Chain Reaction, I think it was .org or something like that website, used to be up there. They took it all down just prior to 2020, interestingly enough.
Interestingly enough, isn't that?
Yeah, I really wish I had access to all of that, but they scenarioed all of this and that how countries would begin to shut down, which we're seeing right now. They would begin to stop trading with each other, especially in food. And we're seeing that right now. Like,
We are.
what is the one? Hungary just said, and they're a pretty significant wheat exporter, and they just said, "No, we're not exporting any wheat." Vietnam is a pretty significant rice. They said, "No, we're not going to feed our own people." country after country is starting to say, no, we're not going to do any trade. And now we've got this whole Ukraine Russia thing going on. We're shutting down even more. Last year, China bought up half of the world's grain supplies, like half of the world. Like, how do you buy half of the world's grain supplies? They bought half of the world's grain supplies. And now if you're wondering, how do you store half of the world's grain supplies?
That's major.
Well, you don't just like build a bunch of grain silos. So what, they all came in on containers. So they're just stacking these containers up, God knows where, somewhere in China. And that's why containers now cost 500 times, 500% more than they used to, right? Because all the containers are full of grain and they're using it for storage in China. Like if China is hoarding food and preparing for a famine, right? Don't you think you should too? Right?
I mean, yeah, I always say you should always do what the smartest guys in the room are doing for themselves. Central bankers are accumulating gold. China's accumulating food. They have a large population that they have to feed.
Yeah, every country is actually doing the best they can to keep their own food within their own borders. And that's part of what this whole simulation was about. Like everything would shut down, global trade would shut down. So I would love to know more about how that scenario unfolded. But again, they shut the website down. But we're looking at least a decade of all kinds of, this is not just going to magically get better.
Well, it looks like we're also going for, tit for tat. We've been talking about, which President Biden now did, not importing Russian oil. And Russia's now saying, well, everybody's threatening us to not import our oil. How about if we just don't export our oil? And we've got, and natural gas, which has, everything, the level of spikes, you're not talking about 40% or 50%, you're talking about 3,500%. You're talking about massive percentages in now, personally, that doesn't happen for me because I have ponds, so I have all my fish fertilizer. But, the cost to even grow.
Food is oil, right?
Yes, it is.
Food is oil, every aspect of it, from the machines that plow up the ground, to the planting, to the chemical fertilizers, to the chemical pesticides. All of this is derived ultimately from some type of petroleum product, to the harvesting, to the processing, to the packaging, and then even, like I was saying, that 1,500-mile average delivery distance. It all involves oil. And like just before this, I checked in. I was shocked because crude oil just a couple of days ago was only only $110 a barrel. Now it's over $130 a barrel. And there's no end in sight to this. And I think we saw in 2008 when oil hit 140 a barrel, the global economy shut down. And so it's, we're there. We're there.
I think it's interesting that you point that out, and you pointed out the date. And 2020 was such a critical year that the timing of everything was perfect. And now with the war, it's easy to point the finger. And, I think it's all a bunch of misdirection, if you want to know the truth. Look over here, look over here.
I completely agree. We've got, this oil thing with food prices are about, but their own printing of their own money was going to cause the whole thing to collapse anyway. So
exactly. And that's how China bought all of that grain, was just by creating money from debt. That this whole system is, frankly, the whole fiat money system is imploding. And it's time to get real. It's time to get tangible.
And when you open this up, I absolutely want to reflect on what you said. And I've seen quite a few of the interviews that you've done with people that survived hyperinflation. I have done a lot of interviews with people through, civil war or natural disaster or whatever, both a living and lots of historical accounts.
Yep.
And, there's kind of the three major things. And one, absolutely, I don't have my handgun here, but security is, you better get beefed up on your personal security.
100%.
Absolutely. The other is
100%.
medical stuff. The medical
Yes. I
system
want to
shuts
talk
down.
about that.
If you're dependent on a medicine, you need to stock up on that and then figure out a local natural alternative. But the biggest thing all those survivors of those collapse talked about, it was not about, violence and medicine. It was about being hungry. They were starving. And that is the biggest factor in any type of hardship situation, that is your most immediate need. And yeah, you're going to need a lot of things, but food is absolutely primary and by a large margin.
Yeah. I mean, that was one big reason why I decided to do, grow on the exterior of my property. I grow all over the property, but I don't know, because I've had so many people say, oh, well, you're just wasting your time because they'll come in and they'll just destroy everything. Maybe they will. That's not within my control. But I'm kind of thinking that if people are hungry and hopeless and they have a place where they know that they can go and get food every day and feed their family, maybe they won't destroy it because they realize how much they need it.
And they'll help you defend it. Really, I'm actually a big project. I just recently, a couple of years ago, moved to Puerto Rico, and I don't know anybody. I immediately started on a project to create a large scale community garden.
Awesome.
And what better thing than to have everybody in the community who knows how to grow food coming together and hanging out with them like every day or every other day, getting to know them, getting to see what they're doing. People say, I don't know how to grow food. I'm like, start a community garden, and in one season, you will know how to grow food because you'll be seeing what everybody else is doing. You'll know what works and what doesn't work.
Exactly. So you were able to go down there and buy a plot of land, or was a plot of land donated to you, or how
I'm
did that
actually
work?
working with the city municipality. They happen to have this big 6-acre tract of land
Oh,
that was,
nice.
yeah. So we're still negotiating on that, and they may have to give me another tract, but I insisted that I wanted something big, at least 3 acres.
Right.
I want at least 100 garden plots there because, I just want a large mass of people. I want to make a significant difference.
That's really kind of incredible because I mean we talk about community gardens, but I didn't really I
You
can't
know
say
what?
that I've ever
Let,
started one,
let's do another show sometime, and I'll just go through all the steps and learnings that I've had on creating this community garden, because it really is a beautiful piece. Because and I've heard you talk about it, because and anybody who's been in this for a while, there's some real basics, and one is
Right.
building community is almost as important as having your own food supply, maybe more. Like, it's really hard to have your own food supply without a community, actually.
It takes a community. I know
It
people
does.
come on property and they go, "Oh, do you do that in my spare time?" Which I
You're
don't
right.
really have any.
All of us in our well, that's the other thing with all the things that I've looked at, all the different ways of growing food. What's the fastest and the easiest? Because nobody's going to have time. And just because it collapses
Right.
does not mean you're going to have more free time. You're going to have less free time, right? You're going to be dealing with all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, how do you get stuff up quickly? And that's been a big part of what I've been working on.
Well, I think this is like an absolutely perfect segue into, this what you've all been watching has been part one. But we now have a new channel that we want to, and I want to give you some time to promote what you've got to promote too, Marjory. But part two and on solutions, you'll go to Beyond Gold and Silver on our new YouTube channel, and you'll be able to watch the rest of this interview. But before we completely close out, I would like you, if there's anything about the issues or the problems that you are seeing in the global food chain or even in the local food chain, and then I'd like you to talk about an event that's coming up this weekend.
Yeah, so I think you see it every time you go in and you see an empty shelf in your grocery store. You know it's coming. Every time you look at that chicken that used to be, $5 and now it's $10. It's coming. It's coming. And you're like, if you're watching this channel and you've been watching Lynette, you're way above what's going on with the rest of the world. And definitely take this message to heart. You need to start learning how to grow food. Buy as much backup food as you possibly can and start learning to grow food. Even if you're in an apartment or a condo, do what you can. And there are a lot of solutions. And this Saturday, I'm having a webinar. The Grow Network, which I founded, has always been more of a mission and everything since God slapped me around at the Red Rock Community Center. Everything's been a mission and purpose-driven thing. So what we're offering is a free webinar on Saturday where I'm going to just condense like 20 years of looking at this problem. And you will come away from that webinar with an action plan of how to get started, a very clear idea of what's realistic to produce and when and how. And regardless of what time of year it is or what location you're in, you will have action steps to get started today to start growing food. So we'll go a little bit over, the global situation and what the top producing countries are doing and what they're not. Then we'll get right into how do you do this? And then also bring your questions, because the most part that people love the most is we have a live Q&A afterwards. So that's coming up this Saturday. And Lynette, I'm sure you've got a link for people to be able to click on to get to that.
Absolutely. It's both below and on our blog. So I think this is a really important webinar, and I encourage everybody to attend. I'm going to attend. So we'll see you there.
Awesome.
And to everybody out there, I hope that you got a lot out of this, because food is the single most important issue. You need to be prepared. So I agree with Marjory. As much food as you can put back, but also growing some fresh food. I mean, your body needs it. Your brain needs it. And we all need to be thinking more clearly so that on the other side of this mess, we retain choices. This is about sustaining your current standard of living. And if you can't eat, you are not able to sustain your current standard of living.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's also about, it's about community, and it's about family, and it's about coming together to weather this massive storm that it would be hard for me to imagine that anybody cannot see. So
this is coming. Yeah. And Lynette, we will switch over. I do want to say though, I am so grateful for that day at the Red Rock Community Center. And everybody watching this, that, a couple of years from now, and you've got a flourishing garden and you've got chickens and rabbits and you're producing your own food and you've got new levels of energy and clarity and health. And like me, you'll look back and you'll go, that was the best thing I ever did in my life.
Absolutely. Let me tell you, in March and April of 2020, and since then, I'm walking around my gardens when this whole thing started hitting and unfolding, and I'm saying, thank God, because I had no idea what to do. I just jumped in. Now you've got an expert. I could have used your guidance when I was trying to figure this out, but you had to figure it out too. We all do, but then there are those of us that have gone before. And, it just makes a whole lot of sense to build on that knowledge base and take what works for you, and then implement it so that you're not faced with food insecurity that, it's been a growing problem, and it's now getting much, much worse. So I will tell everybody, it is definitely time to cover all of your assets, including your ability to feed yourself and your family. And until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.